Hello, everyone. Welcome to Tea Time with Dr. Iyabo. It's December 6th, and it is time for Tea Time with Dr. Iyabo. Today I have Dr. Russell Kennedy, who is the Anxiety MD with me, and I'm so excited to have him. One second, I need to adjust my pillows. Yeah, I'm so excited to have the Anxiety MD with me today. Anxiety is an epidemic, really. And I have him on now, but I'm just going to talk for 1 minute. Anxiety is an epidemic now. In my work with women, there's so many women that I know from the symptoms that they are, hi everybody, hi bold, beautiful and opinionated. Thank you so much for joining my show. I think most of you know who I am, so I really don't have to introduce myself, but anxiety is really an epidemic. I have many women that I work with, and I know that some of their symptoms are due to anxiety, and the epidemic has even made it so rampant. It's like, it's an epidemic. And I'm going to share my story of a kind of anxiety that I did have in my 30s. If you've read my book, you probably have seen it in my book, but I'm going to go ahead and bring Dr. Russell Kennedy on now, because you guys know how 1 hour goes so fast. So yes, Dr. Kennedy, call him Ross, but I think it's the Nigerian in me. It's hard for me to call people by their first name. Hi there.
Hi, Iyabo.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Thanks for making the time to come on my show. I was just telling the audience that I think it's the Nigerian in me. It's hard for me to call people by their first name when they have a title. So I'm still referring to you as Dr. Kennedy. So I may go back and forth.
Yeah. I'm fine with that, Dr. Iyabo. I'm fine with that.
Okay, so everyone, welcome. This is Dr. Russell Kennedy. He's the Anxiety MD. I'm going to tell him, he has a really long resume. I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about him, then I'll let him introduce himself. And we're just going to dive in because 1 hour goes fast when you're having fun. So Dr. Russell Kennedy is a physician and neuroscientist from Victoria, BC, Canada. He's also a stand-up comedian, so he has to tell us a few jokes on this show. Are you as funny as Mr. Bean? Or not?
Different. I'm different than Mr. Bean, for sure.
I know. Okay, yeah, I'll have, my husband and I love Mr. Bean. A lot of people can't stand him. They don't think he's funny, but I just find him really funny. But anyway, so Dr. Kennedy is also a stand-up comedian. He's also a certified yoga instructor and a meditation teacher. And he also has master's level training in neuroscience and developmental psychology. So yes, he has a lot to bring to this show. So you guys, I want you to be interactive. I want you to ask questions. Feel free. If you feel that the question you have is kind of private and you don't want to discuss it on air, please feel free to DM me or to DM Dr. Kennedy later on. I'm sure he'll be happy to answer your questions. And he has a book out. So guys, go and buy that book. I've been preaching for the last few weeks that's it, the anxiety treatment. Go and buy that book. It's on my list. It's going to be one of the books I'm going to read in January after I'm done with the Obama book, because I do know a few people who suffer from anxiety, and I've suffered from a kind of anxiety before, and I'm going to share that. People who've read my book know what I'm talking about, but I'm going to share it again on air because, being vulnerable is the best thing. So before I continue rambling on, Dr. Kennedy, please tell us about you, and then just tell us, you can start off with telling us what you want to share about anxiety, and then I have a whole list of questions for you.
Well, I usually start out with, I grew up with a father who was schizophrenic and bipolar. So my environment when I grew up was pretty chaotic. So I developed this anxiety disorder from a very young age, probably around 13 or 14 years old. I went through medical school. I became a yoga and meditation teacher, a stand-up comic, all that kind of thing. But through the whole time, I was really anxious. There was days, there was weeks where I wouldn't leave my house. And if I didn't have my dog Buddha, who I still have, who's still a wonderful dog, I wouldn't have left the house. And So I really analyzed anxiety from a number of different ways. I saw 50 different practitioners, from high-level psychiatrists to energy healers, like really out there energy healers. I took ayahuasca, LSD, MDMA, all this stuff, not to get high, but to understand my mind. I lived at a temple in India for a while, and I studied anxiety there. I really studied it from as many perspectives as I could, because traditional therapies didn't help me at all. Talk therapy didn't really help me at all. And it really came down to this one experience I had on LSD when I was kind of at the end of my rope, that showed me that my anxiety was actually not in my mind at all. It was in my body. It was old, unresolved trauma from my childhood, mostly from my dad, that was stuck in my body. And the reason why I was stuck in my head worrying all the time was it was easier, I put that in quotation marks, it was easier to stay in my head and worry than it was to go back and visit this old trauma in my body. So that's why worries, when we have worries, they get worse and worse and worse, because what they're trying to do is keep you away from your body. So I wrote a book based on it. I wrote a book based on my experience. And once I started addressing the alarm that's in my body, my anxiety just started to fade away. So I thought, well, I'm onto something here for the first time in my life. I suffered with anxiety for decades. And then I found that this is the way to do it. And this book is like, unlike any other book on anxiety that there's out there. It's very, very different. It's written from this sort of semi-ethereal kind of yoga teacher, psychedelic side, but I also have, academic, I'm a doctor of medicine. I'm, master's level training in developmental psychology and neuroscience. So I understand the science of it, but I also understand the art of it as well. So I think that's why this book is different, and that's why people can expect to get some insights and some healing from this, whereas maybe self-help stuff really hasn't helped them very much in the past.
Okay, so you did make a statement saying that you noticed that anxiety wasn't in your mind, it was in your body. Can you explain that? I'm not quite sure I know what that means.
Sure. So back around 2013, I was really in bad shape with anxiety. And sort of at the end of my rope, considering whether or not I should live or not, there were some suicidal thoughts in my mind. And my friend said, well, why don't we try you on some LSD just to see if that gives you a different perspective. So I took the LSD. It was frightening. Like, I don't recommend psychedelics to people, especially people with anxiety, because we tend to be control freaks. And what LSD and all those other medications do, the psychedelics, they tend to take your control away from you. But what I did see when I started to become a little more rational, when the medication started to fade away, was I was told, and I don't know where this comes from, but my anxiety was actually in my solar plexus, just around my heart area. It's purple, it's crystalline, it's sharp, it's hot, it pushes up against my heart, and that is my alarm. That is the alarm that's in my system. And I have a theory also that alarm, that when we find it, that's our younger self asking for our attention. And when we push away those feelings, when we go into our heads, when we worry, when we stay away from that feeling, it just gets louder. Like, if you imagine a child come up to you and has their hands up to be picked up, and you don't pick them up, they're going to get louder, or they're going to just quit altogether. So I think it was really important for me to understand that I had to really address, when I get upset, I put my heart on that, or I put my hand on that area. I really focus on having loving, compassion, attention for that area, because when I was younger, I didn't get that loving, compassion, attention. I mean, there was love in my family without a doubt, but there was also a lot of chaos. And I've always been a very sensitive person, a very sensitive child. So it was one of these things where I had to figure out where the source of the anxiety was, which it was in my body. And I'm not saying talk therapy doesn't help. I think talk therapy absolutely does help. But if you just do talk therapy alone without incorporating the body, I don't think you're going to get a lot better. And I don't think that you're going to heal from the anxiety in the short term or the long term unless you deal with the anxiety, the alarm that's stuck in your body.
Okay. So before we go into the treatment, I do understand that your dad's schizophrenia is what you believe led to your anxiety. What about your mom going through all this? Was she able to offer, you don't have to answer this question.
Yeah, no, I get it. Yeah.
Was she able to offer support to you while this was going on, or was she also developing anxiety herself?
Well, one of my jokes is that my father was psychotic and my mother was neurotic, so my own psyche didn't stand much of a chance. So my mother she came from Great Britain. She came from Glasgow. She was Scottish. She comes from a family that's not really that emotive. Like there's no I love yous, there's no hugs, that kind of thing. So my mother tried her best to love my brother and I in the best way that she could. But in one of these ways, like we love the way that we were loved when we were younger. You know, I
Yeah,
love hearing that you had a great relationship with your dad because I know if you have a wonderful relationship with a parent, it really teaches you how to love
yeah,
properly, if that's the right term. So you
yeah,
learn how to love in this certain way. Now, my mother was very attentive to me. Like she made sure, my meals were made, my laundry was done, all this kind of stuff. But she worked a lot. She was a registered nurse. She kept the family going because my father couldn't work. And so she was away a lot. So I kind of became the man of the house at around 13 years old. So she did the best she could. And I love my mom. She's still around. She's 87. I still phone her when I was writing the book. I said, what would be a better word to use in this case? And she said, oh, you should use the word deliberate instead of, whatever I was thinking. So I
yeah.
still call her up. She's great. We have a great relationship. I love her very much. But it's just, I didn't get the attachment that I needed to soothe that alarm. And I was listening to, your interview with Nicole, Dr. LaPera, who, endorsed my book, and just about how our old patterning when we're children, we develop these roles in life, and it's very hard to break out of those roles. So I became kind of a rescuer caregiver. One of the reasons I became a doctor.
So do you think anxiety is genetic, or do you think we acquire it from our life experiences, or is it both?
It is both. It is both for sure. I'm
Yeah,
sure there's a genetic component to it as well. But when you watch a parent worry, when you're growing up, when you see a parent and you may not know it when you're a child, but you feel it as a child. You feel the anxiety in a parent. Like
yeah.
you can really sense it. And when you sense that, you bring some of it on. And if you watch someone who has anxiety as a parent the thing about having anxiety in a parent is not so much that they're not attentive to you as a child. It's just that they are in this state because when you get into anxiety or alarm, you get into this sort of shut down emotional state. So you can't give to your children because you're basically in a survival mode. Your brain goes into this limbic survival mode. And in that limbic survival mode, it's very hard to express and give love. And that's why people have social anxiety disorder, because when you go into this emotional part of your brain, which is lower down as opposed to the prefrontal cortex, which controls all your higher functions, when you go into that emotional brain, your ability to be social, your ability to read eye contact, facial expression, body language goes down. So you don't feel as comfortable. So why would you want to go into a social situation when you're not armed with it? It'd be like somebody saying, hey, we're having a cricket match and we want you to be the captain of our team, and you've never played cricket before. So you're not going to want to go to that match because you're not very good. So why would you want to go to a party if you're not equipped to be able to read other people's emotions? So that's why people get pretty upset about social situations.
Okay, but Russ, and I do understand that. I understand parents being anxious and transferring it to their kids and kids sensing it. So are we all anxious people then? So honestly, because I had to think about this before coming on about
Yeah.
my life story, and most people on you probably have read my life story.
Yeah.
I was brought up in a really lovely family. My parents, were great. I probably only saw my parents have a row once. Maybe
Yeah.
I'm sure they had other rows, but they just hid it from us. But I only saw one
Sure.
major row once. But
Sure.
I grew up in a loving household, so I expected that when I got married. But I got the shock of my life. And my ex was a really good person, but then the people around him were not as positive. I don't want to use negative words. So I did
Sure.
have quite a traumatic time during my marriage. And I'm sure that my kids, especially my older daughter, because she was older, she saw a lot of this. And I've had to deal with some of those, manifestations in her, because kids from divorced homes do experience all of these things. Maybe my younger daughter, I'm sure she got all of that. But then as a single mother, but even as a married mom, I was worried about life. I was worried about my kids. I
Of
was
course.
so then are we all anxious people? Because everybody on here, I'm sure if we had the time to interview each person, they
Sure.
would say, "Oh yes, I'm worried. I'm anxious about life." So, is there a norm? Is it on a spectrum of normal?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think everyone has anxiety to some extent, you know, and I
Yeah,
think it really depends on the level of connection that you had as a child. You know, if you had secure attachment, which you apparently did, you know, your ability to love and give love would be quite good, as
yeah,
opposed to someone who grew up in an environment that didn't have that. You know, I heard one of your interviews where you talk about women staying in abusive relationships. And, you know, and especially, you know, Nigeria, I know a little about it, I don't know a lot about it, but, you know, and women in general are trained to look after other people. That's
yeah,
basically, and especially in countries like
yeah,
Nigeria. So you have these women who are these strong internal, but they're designed, or they're shown these different things that you have to look after other people all the time.
yeah,
So if you're in an abusive relationship and your training was that you have to look after the other person, you start molding yourself to adapt to the trauma. And then depending on what the trauma was when you were younger, you know, if you grew up in a family where the father was kind of abusive, you will tend to attract that in a partner.
yeah,
So yeah, and
yeah.
I used to see that in my practice. You know, I would see women who had alcoholic parents would often pick alcoholic partners, because I
Mm,
think what happens when we're younger is we equate familiarity when we're a child to security. So even though the environment wasn't secure, even though it wasn't safe, you know, if you watched your father beat your mother or something like that, there is something in you that equates that behavior with safety in this, you know, unconscious part of our mind. So unconsciously, and Nicole was talking about that too, 95% of the time we are unconscious, we're not aware. We will gravitate towards that in a partner. And it's
mm.
just knowing that. So if you know that you were a rescuer when you were young, I know you were the youngest in the family. Typically, it's the oldest child in the family that gets this kind of rescuer complex.
Yeah,
And, you know, and it's very hard for women who are the oldest in the family to break out of those patterns because they were rewarded for it. You know, if you were 13, 14, 15 and a girl and you were running your household, you were getting the groceries, you were getting your dad fed, you were looking after your mom, you know, it becomes a role that you get something out of, so that you tend to focus back on that role again as you become older. So you pick a man who you have to look after.
mm.
And then it really tends to go badly because, as Nicole was saying, we get into these roles that are kind of archetypes, and it's very hard to go out of those roles. The other thing that she was talking about is it's very difficult to leave an abusive relationship if that's your only source of connection. So she was
Yes.
talking about
I
making,
remember she
yeah,
said that. That was powerful. I remember that. Yeah.
absolutely. So it's making friends outside of your circle, because that will allow you the sort of buffer zone that you need to leave. If he is your only connection, it's virtually impossible to leave. I mean, it really is.
Hmm.
So it's making these connections. And typically, the males don't want their wives, who are they're trying to control, having external friends. So they won't like your external friends. That's just how
Yes.
it goes.
Oh, yeah.
But if you know that that's what's going to happen, you
Yeah.
know, forewarned is forearmed, and you can kind of understand, and then you can kind of keep those friendships going, because that community, and Nicole talks about this too, and so do I, that community is what you heal in. You don't heal, like once you leave, you don't heal by just being by yourself. You need other people in there. So it's
Yes.
all about setting up that framework before you go. Because if
Yes.
you just all of a sudden go and there's no framework, you're going to go back. And then when you go back, you're going to feel terrible about yourself, because it's like, look, I put myself back into this abuse again, when it's really not your fault in a way.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what, Russ? People use social media as their therapy. I've seen it over and over. People use social media
Yep.
as an outlet rather than having a group of people that they actually trust that they can go to because they feel trapped in their homes. I've seen women do this. I can because I'm so intuitive. When I read some of the posts that I see out there, I reach out to some of my friends and I'm like, "Are you okay?" because I can tell that you're reaching out, you're just saying a general statement out to social media, you're asking for help in a very indirect way, but I can tell you're going through and they're like, yeah, boy, are you psychic? Are you? I'm like, no, because I can tell, rather than because you don't have anybody you can trust to go to. So you're reaching out to the entire world for help in a very indirect way. And that's bad. I have a lot of questions here,
Sure.
and there's questions also coming up. So we may have to do a part 2 of
Sure.
this. I kind of felt that we would have to, because anxiety is such a big problem these days. But can you comment on that, and please help women understand that posting your worries and your fears on social media is only going to further exacerbate your problem?
Yeah, I mean, there's something in our brains called the social engagement system, and it runs through our brain and our body, and it uses eye contact, facial expression, tone of voice, prosody of voice, which is the movement of your voice up and down, and it allows us to connect with other people. And this is the problem with our kids. This is why our kids have such an anxiety problem now, is because they're not getting this face-to-face interaction with other people that matures this social engagement system that we have. So when we mature this social engagement system, when you're younger, if you're out playing with your friends, they fall, you see that their reaction on their face, or they've just, scored a goal or done something great, you see and feel their reaction. And that matures a part of our social engagement system. But what's happening now with our children is that we are using that media as a way of social engagement, but it doesn't feed the brain. It doesn't feed the body. It doesn't feed that social engagement system. So what happens is the kids get stressed, and then they go back to their screens, because that's what's given them, they perceive their screens are what's helping them, when their screens are just making them worse. So there is this, what I call pseudo connection. And you as a physician will know exactly what I mean by that. Like this, it appears to be connection, but it's not. It's not something that feeds us from a psychological or a body base. So what happens is that we get this empty connection. We have we get sort of inflated by that empty connection, but there's nothing there when you need it. So if you're looking at getting out of an abusive situation, you can't do it because you can't rely on somebody that you're Instagram friends with. You have to be real friends with someone. That's what's really important. But it does lull us into this false sense of security that, we have a social network, and that when we don't, what we have is we're standing in front of it. We're standing in front of a screen, and a screen is not going to save you.
Okay. And I'm glad you've said that to further emphasize now, because the pandemic isn't yet over us. We're probably still in this pandemic for another, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months until the vaccine works. We don't know. What would you suggest to us? Well, for me, I love this. I'm a homebody, so I thrive at home. So for me, this is actually happiness and joy. I only need 2 or 3 people around me to be happy.
Right.
Some people need many people. I thrive in this. If I read books and I just see my husband and my kids and a few neighbors here and there, I'm okay. But some people can thrive on that. So how do we help our kids? I have a 16-year-old, I have a 23-year-old, and I know it gets to them sometimes. How do we help our kids? How do we help the extroverts out there? How do they maintain their social lives in the meantime, before we can all get back to normal again?
Well, I think it really comes down to connection with yourself, because if your connection with yourself is good, you don't need hundreds of other people. And I find that I find that people who require a ton of other people in their lives almost universally aren't that connected to themselves. And that's why they feel they need so many other people in their lives. So, and that usually comes from childhood as well. So it's a matter of this trauma that we hold in us. And we all, as human beings, we all hold this trauma. And the more that you can connect with yourself, and one of the things that I do is I get people to find the alarm in their body. So can I do something quickly with you for like 2 minutes?
Sorry, with me?
I'm gonna try. So basically, go back to your 30s, because I know your 30s were really hard for you, right? Like you just finished your residency, your kids were still young. So that stress, like close your eyes for a second and just focus on that stress that you felt. I just finished residency. I have these two small kids. My marriage is kind of, Where do you feel that in your body, Iyabo?
Everywhere, but mostly in my head.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there, because a lot of times for most people, it's between their chin and their pubic bone. It's usually in the midline somewhere. So is there somewhere around your heart or your stomach or whatever that feels different, or your throat?
I'll say my head and my
Okay.
chest. My
Okay.
chest.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that part in your chest, put your hand over that area, right? Now, is that area kind of diffuse, or is it like specific, like the size of a potato or a fist, or is it have a sharp boundary, or is it kind of diffuse?
It's diffuse.
Okay. And if you said it had a temperature, would it be hot or cold?
Hot. But then I'm
Okay.
always hot because I'm getting hot flashes.
Okay. Yeah, I guess. Well, you don't look 50. I looked at the other day and I was like, man, she doesn't look 50. So that area, so it's kind of diffuse, it's hot. If you had to give it a color, and you don't have to, but if it had a color, what would it be?
Orange.
Okay. So that is your younger self asking for your attention, right? And you can even put your hand on your head and your heart at the same on that area, because it's really important to connect with that area, because that's the area that needs help. That's the area that needs connection. It doesn't need all these hundreds of other people. It needs you. And then what we think is that we're getting all our sort of positive vibes from the internet these days if we don't have people around us. So I think the key is to really learn how to focus on connecting with yourself. And
Mm.
that may be uncomfortable, especially if you have old trauma that's in there, because you
Yeah.
don't want to go back into that particular point. So I would say, this part in your chest and your head is part of your younger self that felt kind of helpless, that felt
Mhm.
kind of alone. Because usually
Yeah.
the traumas that we have are not because our husband isn't doing this, or our
You're right.
mother or father isn't doing that. It's from something from our past that's we're being reminded
You're
of
right.
that same situation. There's
Yeah.
something in our brain called the amygdala, which is basically the fear center of the brain. And the amygdala will respond to anything that was very similar to trauma in your past. An example, I tell this on my Instagram page. I had a girlfriend years ago, probably 15, 20 years ago, who, whenever I would leave, even if I was just going to go to the store to get something, would freak out. She would get really angry at me. She'd start throwing things sometimes. And I realized that it wasn't me going to the store. It was the fact that her dad left when she was 8 years old. So
Oh.
any male figure leaving her, even if it's just to go to the store, not all
Mm.
the time, but would fire her right up. So a lot of the time, a lot of the stuff that we stress about,
Makes
that we
sense.
say, I'm mad because my husband is doing this or my mom's doing this. It's not that. It's actually from your past, and it's just a reminder, and your brain is reminding you of that same situation, and your body is going through that same change. So again, it's really important to find that alarm in your system, to go back to a time where you felt, unkept or unhelped, and you find that part in your body that hurts, and then connecting with that part. And one last thing I'm going to say, because I know I'm talking a lot,
Oh
is
no, this is good. People are
yeah,
really enjoying this, and we're taking
yeah.
it all in.
when
Yeah.
you if you have anxiety in the middle of the day or the middle of the night, just ask yourself this one question. Say, am I safe in this moment? Like, I know I'm worried about what's going to happen tomorrow. I know I'm worried about getting my kids to school. I know I'm worried about what my husband's going to do. But right in this moment that you're in right now, are you safe? And 99 times out of 100, the answer is yes. But we don't tell ourselves that enough. So we get into this framework where we're always waiting. If you've got an abusive situation at home, you're always waiting for that to blow up. So it's really important to focus on the time when you're fine, when you're okay, when you're looking around, if you're at the grocery store, or if you're doing yoga, or you're doing you're meeting with a friend. You can just sort of put your hand on your chest and go, right in this moment, I'm actually safe. Because unconsciously, we don't acknowledge safety. We are constantly waiting, especially if you've got trauma in your childhood. We are always waiting for that other shoe to drop. We are always waiting for the next thing to kind of blow up. So it's
Mm.
really, really important. And Nicole talked about this too, about the sort of the random timer. Pick a random time in the daytime and then just say, where are you right now? What are you doing? And then I add to that, put your hand on your chest, take a breath, and just say, you know what, at this moment, right now, I'm safe. In 2 hours, I may not be, but right now, I'm safe, because it really trains your brain to see that you are safe. You know,
Mm.
that you're not going from one trauma to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next. You are safe. And in fact, most of the time we're safe. We just
Yeah,
are, just the way our brains are wired, we just don't allow ourselves to see that, because we are evolutionarily based safety seeking creatures.
yeah.
So, and so we will preferentially look for harm, as opposed to say, hey, you know what? Everything is safe, especially if you had trauma in your childhood.
Whoa, wow, there's so much truth in that. So basically, trying to enjoy your own company, getting to know yourself, right, is
Yeah.
key. So when I say that I'm a homebody, I just like being home. I really enjoy my own company, but I've always been like that though. I don't like too much sensory stimulation. If I have to be by myself, and my husband even understands this. Once I get a little cranky, he's like, okay, but I just need to have that quiet time to be able to survive. And I just love my own company. And then there'll be times where I want people around me, right? So what you've said so far is we should learn to love ourselves. We should learn to connect with ourselves, right? Because if we feel that we're always wanting people around, then it means that we don't really have the connection with self. And we should also ask ourselves in any moments that, am I safe in this moment, right? Am I safe? So which means, like Nicole said, and you are saying it over and over too, we need to be present in the moment,
Yeah.
right? That's easier said than done.
Absolutely
That's
true.
yeah, that's easier said than done, because sometimes I find my thoughts going all over the place. So then I just pick up my journal and I start to write, or I start playing music, or I go
Yeah.
for a walk.
Yeah.
Yeah, or I go for a walk. There's many ways that I know how to manage those thoughts, but not everybody has those tools. So before we get to the treatment and before the tools and everything you want to share with us, there are a few questions here. My Nigerian sisters are asking
Sure.
that what about if you live in a country like Nigeria where there's so much chaos around you? How
Yeah.
how do you deal with anxiety in that kind of situation?
I think it's really making that connection with yourself. You know, it's really devoting some time every day to really feel your own touch, smells that you like. I know I recommend sometimes essential oils, you know, because basically from a neuroscience point, uh, smell is the only sense that goes directly into the emotional brain. Every other sense, touch, sight, whatever, is processed by the brain first. But smell goes right into the emotional part of our brain. So anything that you can smell that really calms you down, do
Mm,
use that. Music is really helpful. You know,
yeah.
connecting with a friend, you know, making eye contact, really being there face to face is really, really important at soothing us, because we are social creatures. We do need each other. So a lot of it is not so much about what you can do externally, it's about what you can do to connect with yourself.
Okay.
And this is part of the problem, because if you had trauma when you were younger, it's hard to connect with yourself. And that's what the book is really all about, is showing you ways that your ego will block you from loving and caring for yourself. Because
Mm,
I invented this little mnemonic called jabs. So what we do is we judge, alienate, blame, and shame ourselves.
mm,
And when we do that, we separate from ourselves. And when we separate from ourselves, we're sitting ducks for stress. Because to handle stress, we need to be connected within ourselves. And that's why I like movement practices too, like, you know, yoga,
yeah.
Tai Chi, Qigong, that kind of stuff. You know, even you don't have to do an hour and a half. You can do 5 minutes. You can do 5 minutes of yoga or Qigong or something, just to get your mind and body connected again. Because a lot of what stress is your mind and your body have become disconnected. You've gone
Yeah.
up into your you've gone up into your head, and there's no
Yeah.
safety up here. It's
Yeah.
not safe up here. The only safety is in your body, and it's
Yes.
it's learning how to treat your body. So, you know, warm baths, focusing on the fact that you are really safe, music that really helps. You know,
Mm,
anything that allows your body to relax and allows you to kind of seep down out of your head and kind of into your body and really look around and go, you know what, I really am safe at this moment. And focus on that safety, because it may not last long. You know, you may be in a zone that has a lot of chaos, But the
Yeah.
chaos outside doesn't necessarily have to mean chaos inside as well.
True.
So, and I
Yeah.
know this is easier said than done because I live, in a city and a country that's fairly calm,
Yeah.
compared, the Canada is pretty calm. So I really feel for your Nigerian sisters who are in an area where it is stressful.
Hmm.
But it really, if there's one thing you get out of this is to see that your thoughts are not helping you.
Hmm.
95% of the time, your thoughts are not helping you. So
Hmm.
it's much better to be able to go into your body and go into feeling than it is to be trapped in thinking. Because if you're trapped in thinking, you never actually allow yourself to get into the feeling of your body and the feeling of your body and embracing uncertainty of life in general by being grounded in yourself and grounding in your body. That's the only place of safety. It really is. Now, we can have other people in our lives that reflect that safety back to us, and that's great. But it really does have to come from you, and you have to make the intention that you are going to look after yourself. And especially in Nigeria, where the focus is on the male structures, the focus is on sort of looking after your husband, looking after your children. It's really important to look after yourself and make that an intention. Because if you don't make the intention of looking after yourself, you'll just get too busy and you'll just do everything else. But making that intention actually talk to that unconscious part, the part that Nicole says that 95% of the time, that's what we're in, that unconscious part. So if you
Yeah.
make an intention, like a firm intention, today I'm going to do 5 minutes, and you don't have to start big. I'm going to do 5 minutes of just connecting to myself. And that may be listening to music. It may be smelling an essential oil. It may be doing a little bit of yoga. It may be just touching your hand to your chest and just connecting with yourself. But
Yeah.
it's really important to make that intention, because once you start doing it, typically you'll start doing it more and more and more and more. But if you're not doing it, typically other things, your kids, your husband, all this sort of stuff will take up your time. And unless you
Yes.
make the intention to look after yourself and put that into your mind in no uncertain terms, today I'm going to look after myself, even if it's just for 5 minutes, you're
Hmm.
changing a step in that old dance. You're changing that archetype, that role that you've played for most of your life.
Yes, absolutely. And as you're speaking, I'm thinking of all the busy working moms who contact me all the time, who
Yeah.
are overwhelmed and all of that. And everything you're saying is what I tell them. It doesn't have to be anything big or major. Start small, soak in a bath, take a walk. For me, walks are just healing. Even if I walk in the house, I tell people that sometimes I walk in my own house. I'll just tell the people in my house, this is my quiet time, please don't talk to me. And I start taking steps up and down, because sometimes it's too cold or I just don't want to step out. So just getting up from where you are and taking a walk and practicing your breathing. And then women, I want to remind you, you have to ask for help. I don't know how much I can say this. I know this is not part of the conversation today, but you can't do it all. There's no jack of all trades. If you can afford to buy new clothes or new shoes or new makeup, you must be able to afford to hire a babysitter or somebody who can, even if it's not every day, 2 days a week for maybe 3 hours a week, where she can attend to your kids and you can just read a book or take a walk or go and get a mani-pedi or something. Okay, Ross, judgmental people, because we've
Yeah.
been saying that people should reach out to social connections, they should talk to people. Somebody said the reason why people don't like doing that much is because people judge. How
Yeah.
do we handle that? And that is very true. And that is why, for me, I've grown to love myself and love my own company, because people could be dangerous and they could harm your mental health even more than anything. So, how do we deal with judgmental people?
Yeah. I mean, well, judgmental people come from a judgment of yourself. When someone judges you, there must be a part of you that agrees with them.
Ah,
Right? So when you find and sort of find that part that agrees with them, like if someone said, I think you said on one of your previous shows, you said that you get accused of being a simplistic thinker,
yeah.
right? Right? So basically, if you say to yourself, that's wrong, that's bad, of course you're judging yourself, right? So something they've said doesn't trigger you. It's something that you've done to yourself. So what I would say is find the part in you that thinks that being a simplistic thinker is wrong. Because if you do have judgment on it, there must be a part of you that thinks that it's wrong. And
Yeah.
if you can find that part, if you find that part that judges yourself and love that part, that's when you start moving past judgment, because
Mm,
then you're connecting with yourself. So
I,
nothing anyone else says to you is coming from it's coming from them. You know, it's
yeah.
like the four
Yeah.
agreements, Don Miguel Ruiz, don't take anything personally, right?
Yeah.
That's one of the big ones. So it's realizing that if you get hurt by someone who says something about you,
Yeah.
especially if it's not true, but it's because you're judging yourself. That's what
Yes.
hurts, you know?
Yeah.
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 And this is that's one of the things that I use in my book is I say, look, if I have two patients in my office, one's a 15-year-old boy, one's a 15-year-old girl, I go in and I say, Melissa, I think you might be pregnant. She may freak out. But if I
Yeah.
go in and say to the 15-year-old boy, hey, Bill, I think you're pregnant, he's just going to laugh at me. So you have to believe on
Mm,
some level their projection on you before it hurts you. Now, it's not to say that it doesn't hurt, because it does hurt, but
mm,
it's finding that place in you that hurts and then directing your love, care, compassion, and attention to that place.
mm. Wow. So you guys, I hope you're already ordering the anxiety treatment book, because when I'm done, I've been looking for the books I need to read after Obama's book. I'm going to get Ross's book today. No, honestly, because if all what you're saying is in there and there's more, I
Oh,
need to
yeah.
read your book. So I hope you guys are already ordering his book and you're ordering it for your friends and giving it to them as Christmas gifts, because I'm not just saying this because I'm helping. And we never even discussed this. I didn't even tell him I was going to talk about his book. But when I see people who are useful, I only bring people on my show who are going to be useful to other people. And this, I know that anxiety is an epidemic because I've suffered, and I'm looking at the time because I want to share my story about anxiety. My best
Sure.
friend Claire is on here. She probably knows what I want to share. The people who've read my book know what I want to share, but there's still other things we want to talk about. Somebody else asked, actually, I was going to tell you, when you talked about the judgmental people, there's something that I say to Black people and my Black fellow brothers, sisters, who are very concerned about racism and prejudice.
Yep.
I say this to them all the time. I say prejudice can only affect you if you accept it. So, and
Yeah.
some people don't agree with that. They send me DMs and they're like, you're simplifying it, you're too simplistic. And I'm like, look, I'm a Black woman. I've lived in England, I've lived in the States for 20 years. And yes, I've experienced racism, but it hasn't affected me because I know who I am. And, why should I be bothered about what people are saying? So prejudice can only affect you if you allow it to. But again, I'm too simplistic, but that's just who I am. Because I feel that if we all could think a little bit more simple and not think about everything so complex, life would be a little bit simpler for us. But that's just me. So again, I don't know if this kind of applies, but this is what I tell my Black sisters and brothers, that, sometimes you just have to tell your mind that I'm not going to let racism affect me. I'm not going to let prejudice affect me. I reject it, and I'm just going to move on with my life and still be the best that I can be, because it's not everybody that is a racist. Some of the people who've helped me the most since I left my all Black Nigerian country have been Caucasians. I say this story all the time.
Yeah.
When I was looking to start my practice, I reached out to all the Black Nigerian women, the African American pediatricians. None of them wanted to help me. Somebody then referred me to this Jewish doctor who was only 5 miles down the street from me. He was a guy, Jewish, Caucasian, and he just helped me. In fact, for years after, he was still my mentor. So how do you explain that? Not everybody's racist. So you'll attract your own tribe. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think with you, Iyabo, is that you grew up in this secure, loving environment, right?
Okay.
So
Yeah.
so you have a little bit of a buffer
Okay.
against, people coming at you. If you grow up with trauma, it's really hard, when someone attacks you, to be able to kind of just go into that secure attachment. So
Yeah.
I can see, if you grew up with trauma, how racism would really affect you. And
Yeah.
again, the thing about growing up in an environment where people are looked at as different, in
Mm.
Canada, um, you know, I have a friend, Daryl Lennox, who's a comedian who I love, who's black as well. And he talks about this too, because, you know, in Canada, he's kind of like a star here, you know, because we're all this sort of white, you know, in general, anyway. I mean, we're multi racist here and that kind of thing too. But in a way, you know, like black people in Canada are looked at as kind of, in a way, it's kind of like a celebrity thing. So in our mind here, we like, it's hard for me to even see, and I know it happens, of course, but it's hard for me to even imagine people who are people of color being having racism against them. But of course I see it. I mean, it's not like I'm completely ignorant to it or whatever.
Yeah.
But what I want to track back to is that when a people is kind of downtrodden like that, as you grow up in that environment, there's part of you that kind of agrees with it because you're being steeped with it in a way. So you're being kind of, if you're told all the time that you're bad or defective or whatever, there's part of your unconscious that believes it. So if
Yeah.
somebody reflects that back to you, the part of you that believes it will get really upset about it.
Yeah.
So I can see how when you grow up in a secure, attached environment, how racism can kind of, you know, you can push it aside. But I think that if you grow up with trauma, I think that racism it just hurts even more. And I think
Yeah.
it's really difficult for people to kind of just allow that to go by. But
You're right.
again, what I would say is connect with the part of you that hurts and soothe that part, because that's the part that needs it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm trying to see where to go now. What are some subtle signs of anxiety? Okay, so it's easy to tell when you're anxious, your heart's racing, your palms are sweaty, you know, you just feel confused, you kind of feel dizzy, or your head is in a fuzz. Are there any other subtle signs, like for people who are on here who may be experiencing anxiety and they don't even know it's anxiety?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's just a sense, you know, the thing that I call on most is it's a sense of impending doom. Like there's this
Ah,
sense,
yeah.
that something's going to go wrong, something's not right, and we can't quite put our finger on it. You know, we can be in the grocery store and it's like, look, I've been in this grocery store hundreds of times before. I don't know why I'm panicking. I don't know why I'm thinking. But that feeling of impending doom, that feeling that there's some kind of danger that's just going to come out of nowhere,
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of a common symptom that I see with people with anxiety that maybe they're not really aware of. You know,
Mm-hmm.
and I see so many people I had one patient who came in and he was basically physically abused by his dad from the time he was about 5 years old. And then he said to me, you know, my dad hit me on a regular basis from the time I was 5 until I left home. And but I'm really grateful for it now because it made me strong. It made me, and it's like, no, that's trauma. That's
Mm-hmm.
real. And so we have holes in this ability to be able to see our own traumas. So this guy thought he grew up with a dad who made him strong, when actually the guy was abusing him on a regular basis. So we have these blind spots to our own traumas. And the amount of trauma that I see with people that people don't acknowledge or they're not aware of is just massive. Like it's just massive.
Yes, yes, it is. And this is an epidemic, especially with the pandemic. So I'm going to share my anxiety that I started experiencing. I think it was somewhere around my very early 30s. It may even have been my late 20s. And and now I know what it is. I'm agoraphobic. So if I go to a place where, so let's say you took me now and you took me to the top of Stone Mountain by
Okay.
myself, and there was nobody like really close to me. And I just stood there and I could just see the vastness of the world around me. I would totally start to panic. I would
Okay.
start to panic and I would, yeah. So I'm agoraphobic. I get anxious in really big spaces that are far away from where I live. The farther
Okay.
away, the more anxious I am. I'm also
Okay.
I'm also claustrophobic.
So
So
you got
if
both sides. You
yeah,
got
on both
too
sides,
much,
yes.
too
So,
little. Okay.
yeah. So I have an elevator at home, and I remember when I bought this house, I'm like, oh, lovely house, and I saw the elevator, and I actually panicked, Ross. And I told the builder, I'm like, can you take it out? Because I don't need, and I don't go into small elevators. And he said, oh, but it's good for the house, it's going to be good for the value and
Right.
all of that. Well, it's there. I use it for my groceries and shopping. Other people use it. I still don't go in it because
Okay.
it's quite small. So, but those were fine. But guess what really crippled me in my 20s and 30s, and I kept it a secret for years. I could not drive on highways.
Okay.
I would completely panic when I was in my car. So I could drive in Nigeria, no problem. I was fine. When I got to England, I was fine because there were small roads. I got to Atlanta and the highways were like 7, 8 lanes. And I'm telling you, Ross, I went through years of you don't even want to know. I would
Yeah.
take taxis. My ex then, he thought it was a game and he would make fun of me that I couldn't drive on highways. But so when Uber came, I was the happiest person. I'm like, oh, I have limos, I have drivers. I could afford the drivers, but I just was ashamed to be in a driver in a taxi with a yellow thing and taking me everywhere. So I struggled with that for years, and I still have it now. I still cannot drive on highways, but I know how to manage it. I just don't drive on highways. I just drive locally, and my husband drives me on highways. And even when I'm this passenger, I still experience symptoms. I'm still so
Okay.
yeah. So I
Okay.
still yeah. So can you hear me? So that is my story with anxiety. I don't have social anxiety. Well,
Okay.
maybe a little. I never used to like speaking in public before, but not to that extent. But I have driving agoraphobia.
Yeah. Okay. So this is where it gets a little weird, Yabo. This is kind of what I do when I do readings on people. When you were 8 or 9 years old, you got lost somewhere in a place that was open. So
Really?
where was that?
Are you a psychic?
Sort of. I mean, I don't think it's so much psychic as that I recognize patterns. And as physicians, we do that, right?
I don't
So,
remember, Ross. I
okay,
don't. I'll maybe in my quiet time I'll have to think about it. I don't remember ever being lost.
okay.
I was a very sheltered child, so I don't remember being lost anywhere.
Yeah, because that's the image that I get is that you kind of got separated from your family and there was an area where there was no way of finding them again. Now,
Wow.
so and sometimes we block that stuff out and maybe it didn't happen, but that's when I get a strong premonition about something, that's
Mm,
where I think your agoraphobia comes from because I think that
wow.
you panicked because you couldn't find
Oh.
your family.
Oh. Wow.
And that's where it comes from. So it comes from this lack of connection. And I know this sounds, and I am a medical doctor and a neuroscientist, so I want to have a seizure sometimes when I talk about the more ethereal parts of it. But that's what I
Yeah.
read with you is that you got
Uh,
lost at some point. And it could have been emotionally too. Like you could have got an emotional trauma when you were 8 or 9, like, one of your friends, you separated from one of your friends and nobody was really there to kind of help see you through it.
mhm,
But there is this sense of being lost or separated from the people that you love, and there was
mhm,
nothing around that would soothe you. So
mhm,
so now when you get into an environment where there's nothing, there's no boundary,
mhm,
then that's when that same old feeling comes back. And the
mm.
claustrophobia, that
Yeah.
I think comes from being held somewhere. Like it might have been physically, like someone physically held you in a
You
place.
know what? I actually know where that one came from because I didn't
Okay,
have claustrophobia from the beginning, and I know exactly where that one came from. I was
okay,
pregnant with my first child. I went
okay,
to visit my aunt in London, and four of us were in an elevator, and I was about 8 months pregnant, and the elevator got stuck.
okay.
And we were on there for about an hour, and it was in the summertime. We were sweating, and I just got really scared. Since that time, I've been scared of small elevators.
Right. Okay. Well, that makes perfect sense for sure.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
so
But that's my story. I just wanted to be vulnerable that
yeah,
I have my
yeah,
driving anxiety that I
yeah.
deal with. Yeah, yeah. So
So, if I worked with you, basically,
yeah.
if I work with you, I would have you envision, being in a car on an 8-lane highway and then finding where you felt that in your body. Now just curiously, just for really quick time. So if you imagine yourself on an 8-lane highway, there's nothing there. Do you feel that area? Is it the same area in your chest and your head that gets
Oh
upset?
yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
My head gets fuzzy,
Yeah.
and my chest just gets hot, and I'm just like, my palms get sweaty, and I'm just, so I feel that feeling of impending doom, like you
Yeah.
described. Yeah.
So when you get that, put your hand on your chest and feel the reassurance of your own touch. And even if you want to say out loud, look, I've got you. It's okay. I'm here
Okay.
for you. I'm here for you. Because that's what it's a younger part of you, and that's what she needs. She needs to feel connected. And if she feels connected, I guarantee you that that feeling will decrease. It may not disappear, but it'll decrease.
Okay. How we have to do a part 2 of this,
Sure.
Ross,
Absolutely.
because we haven't even talked. So we have to buy your book. So everybody, basically, I'm going to have to bring Dr. Kennedy back in the new year, because next weekend is going to be my last show for this weekend, because I don't want to do this over Christmas. But I'll have to bring him back if he's free. But
Oh,
please
yeah.
go and buy his book today, because we haven't even discussed half of what we need to discuss.
Sure.
But I have to be partial, and I have to ask you a question which my best friend asked. She said that
Sure.
her daughter just freezes physically.
Yeah.
How does she deal with that? I'm not sure if I understand her question. Claire, are you still on? She said her daughter freezes physically. Do you understand what she means by that?
Absolutely, I do. I
Yeah,
know
she said, oh
exactly
yeah,
what
she
she's
said she
talking about.
literally freezes up physically. How can she work on that?
Yeah. So basically, there's something called the polyvagal theory. There's the vagus nerve, 10th cranial nerve, goes through the whole body. It's basically the relaxation nerve of the body. But the other side of that relaxation is it will shut your body down. So if you are a small animal and you are cornered by a predator and you're about to die, what that animal will do is it will play dead. So basically, its heart rate will drop, its movement will drop. So what she's in is what's called a functional freeze. And what she needs to do to get out of it, I don't know, how old is her daughter? If you can ask her that, I'll keep talking.
How old is Fikayo? Fikayo is 19 or 20. She's between
Okay.
19 to 21.
Okay.
I don't remember her exact age, yeah.
Okay. So basically what she needs is touch, her own touch and your touch and her mother's touch, if that's possible. So if you can, when she's in this functional freeze, put your hand on her chest over her heart, and then put your other hand on her back so that you kind of surround her heart with your hands. And if you can rub your palms together really fast so that it develops some heat, and then you put it on there, and then you put it on your chest, her chest and her back. So she needs to feel grounded and protected. The reason why people go into a functional freeze is they feel completely alone and separate. So what she needs to do is she needs to feel your touch, your reassurance. Remember what I said about the social engagement system? If you can come around and meet eye contact with her and, show her a friendly face and speak to her in a tone that's very calming and reassuring, and at the same time, have her sort of rub her own thighs. She can sort of rub her shoulders, that kind of thing, because what she needs to do is come into the present moment of her body. Because what's happened is she's got lost in her head. She's gone into this functional freeze, which is a protective response all mammals have. And you have to bring her out by bringing her into sensation, because sensation will bring her into the moment. Because what happens with this is dissociation is basically what's happening with her. She's going into her head, she's getting overwhelmed in her head, and her system has shut down completely. So you have to bring her back into her body. And when you do that, she'll come back out of the functional freeze. And then the more you show her how to do that for herself, and if you're around to support her, the less she'll go into it.
Mm.
Now that's the short answer. There's more to it than that, but basically, with 5 minutes, that's the way I would explain it. She needs to come
Yeah.
into the present moment of sensation. And if she has like an essential oil to carry with her in her purse or whatever, get her used to smelling that, because it's almost like, boxers and smelling salts when they're kind of unconscious and they put the smelling salts under the nose, it kind of wakes them up. Same kind of thing. So get her an oil that she likes, like frankincense or lavender or something like that, and have her carry it with her. So when she feels stressed, she just breathes that, because it does tend to bring you into the sensation of the moment.
Dr. Ross, we love you. Literally, everybody on here really, really loved this session. I have to bring you back. This video is gold. I do want to save it and put it on my YouTube. I will share it with you. But I have to go off because Instagram will log us off and I may lose the video
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Everybody
Thank you,
follow
Iyabo.
the Anxiety MD and go and buy his book, please, and buy it for your friends. Thank you so much. Thank
Oh, you're
you.
welcome, Iyabo. Anytime. I'll see you again in January.
Yes, good. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye for
Thanks,
now.
everyone. Bye.